Good afternoon. Well, yep.
Do we have Chris on the line too?
Okay, excellent.
Hi, Fred.
Hey guys.
We ready?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the April 2026 meeting of the Sagaponic Zoning Board of Appeals, which I am now calling to order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Now, the minutes were a little later than usual this month. And I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to review them.
Yes, I was.
Yes.
Make a motion to accept.
All right, apart from a few typos and the persistent use of principal PLE as opposed to PAL, typos that presumably our capable clerk will pick up. I will second Richard's motion to accept the minutes. All in favor? Okay, minutes are accepted. Adopted. First item, I'm going to reverse the order of this agenda and deal first. Oh, no, excuse me. I apologize. I was going to say I was reverse the order between the Bridge Lane and the Town Line Road application, but we'll take them in order. This is old business, the matter of 182 Town Line Road LLC pertaining to that address. It's application 9 of 2025. We heard testimony at the March meeting seeking a grant of 13 variances on this Town Line Road property. It's a very small property. There are a lot of variances. There was really, in my mind, at least I had little time to review in detail the individual variances and view them against the survey, plot plan, etc. I think Andy Hammer, who presented the application, did an excellent job of presenting them, but in a very compressed time frame. I also felt that perhaps members of the board didn't have sufficient time to digest the presentation and the documents to ask all the questions that they might have wanted to ask and explore in more detail because of the number of variances. Accordingly, though we closed the hearing last month, where there was some ambivalence as to whether we should or shouldn't or needed more information, I personally would like more time to hear both from the board and perhaps the applicant some of the issues pertaining to the variances. And I want to recommend and move to reopen the hearing rather than to grant or deny a blanket decision which purports to deal with all of the variances en masse. So before I entertain that motion, I'm going to ask Andy Hammer, who's here again for Eric Bregman in his absence, whether you would have anything to comment about that, either in favor or in opposition to our doing so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Richard A. Hammer from the Honor of Hammer and Montauk, everyone calls me Andy. I certainly would welcome the opportunity to have further discussion with the board. I think the chairman was correct that there was the numerosity of the variances got presented in a very compressed time frame without any opportunity to give and take with the board and discuss some of the concerns. So I would welcome the opportunity to reopen the hearing and continue our discussion, so I can bring meaningful feedback back to the clients and hopefully approach the board with something that will better follow the board's concerns and preferences.
Good, thank you. Okay, so I will ask the members of the board what we think about reopening the hearing. I will make the motion to reopen the hearing. And I will entertain discussion of that motion before we move to adopt. Any comments?
Well, given our discussion at the end of the last meeting, they wouldn't be anywhere if we just made a decision.
So you're willing to reopen the hearing?
Yeah. Oh,
I should make a note. I'm not comfortable voting on the merits because one of the professionals working on this application is also working for me on something which won't be before this body, but a similar project. So I'm not going to. If we were voting on the merits, I wouldn't vote. In terms of just reopening the hearing, I'm comfortable voting for that, and I think that, I was in the audience at the last hearing. I do think I don't know if I've ever seen an application with so many individual pieces, and I think it's appropriate to deliberate a little more and have a little more of a presentation. So I'm comfortable voting for that, just not on the ultimate yes or no.
You've already heard my comments, so Richard?
The owners on here where they were here last month. So I guess it's okay to reopen the hearing, but we're not going to get the feedback from them. Whereas they were quite instrumental in their discussion of all the feedback that I was giving them at the time last month.
I think that's a valid point. Andy, the architect's not here either.
Whereas you're going to reopen the hearing, I mean, there's not enough people to have a conversation with.
I think Andy, as a representative of the applicants, knows their intentions, and even though they may not be a person, I'm assuming that he would be in a position to present their point of view, at least to some extent, to the extent not with reserve.
Yeah, and I think that the applicant not being here, the owners and the architect, is sort of by design. The hearing was closed. Essentially, the missing piece of this was the board's feedback that I could bring back to them and approach the board at the next meeting with revised proposals. So, there wasn't any meaningful discussion or question and answer. So I think it's more helpful to have me here to say, okay, let's hear what the board's concerns are. Let me bring it back to you at the next meeting and see what we can address, and so the board can look at the result of that.
So to Richard's point, you will get feedback from us, but since we will not be able to definitively get response from your clients, and we're holding the hearing open, we would have the opportunity to get that the May meeting.
Yes.
Which means that the May meeting may be continued for us to digest their reaction to our responses today, right? So we're not going to be compelled, if we reopen the hearing today, to close it next month. It's possible that it might get extended further if necessary, but if not, maybe we can close it in May.
And you have no idea what the written decision was.
No, there isn't any written decision.
No, there's no
There is no decision. There was some proposed language, but we don't have a decision at this point. Okay, this would be
So what I read, which was like a
draft
Oh,
but that doesn't constitute a decision until we adopt it.
right.
We're not adopted.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my first indication, I got an email from Rhodey that said, oh, by the way, you're on for tomorrow. I understood that the record was closed. And, typically when I attend these, there's more backing and forth in where the board can express their concerns or whatever, and I can bring you back, the response of the applicant with house architectural plans, but we just didn't have any of that opportunity last time, I think.
I'm usually in favor of keeping hearings open precisely for that reason, so there can be a more extensive back and forth discussion and adjustment perhaps of an application rather than rendering a decision prematurely. However, it was the lack of further questions at the time. And I think the minutes have reflected there was some reluctance or some indecision as to whether to close it or not.
Yeah, and I think the numerosity of the variances and the different character of each type and different structures associated with it, there's a lot going on. So it was really hard to drill down into what if anything we need to revisit, and would be happy to revisit.
Exactly. And to the point that was cited in, I guess it was Eric Redmond's brief in support of the application. And also, I think in a quote from one of the decisions that we rendered, is that sometimes it's the accumulation of small variances that produce an unfavorable result. And I wouldn't want the accumulation of small variances to defeat an application, because not just the numerosity, but the aggregate effect of the law. So I think we have agreed, three of us and one maybe reluctantly, but all four, to vote in favor of reopening the hearing. Am I correct? All in favor?
Make the motion.
Hmm?
You made the
I
motion?
make the motion.
All right, I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? All right.
Right.
So the hearing is officially reopened. And we can discuss some of that today, but it may be continued into next month's meeting. So I guess the burden is on us at the moment to give you some feedback as to what I'm thinking is.
Yeah, I would like to get some high level feedback in terms of, individual variances, individual structures, so that I can go back and address that with the design.
Okay.
I don't even know if I need to stand here. I could just say
No,
that.
you can have a seat in the front row so you can hear us clearly. Does anyone else want to get in or? Okay. All right. It's
We weren't nearly as verbose as you are when we came to the end of that meeting exactly a month
age
ago.
before beauty. I will undertake an effort to give you some feedback as to our thinking about the application. I will start with the big picture. What complicates this matter or makes it the overarching difference from some of the cases that were cited and the arguments that were in favor of the variances is this is not a renovation of an existing non-conforming structure where our tendency has been to try to allow pre-existing conditions to remain, as long as they don't increase the degree of nonconformity and it's an improvement for the business. What we have here, though, and didn't pay enough attention to that perhaps in our comments last time, was that this is a clean slate application. You're not renovating an existing structure. You're tearing it down. You'll have a completely blank slate on the property in order to design the structure, a new building and accessory structures, which gives you numerous feasible alternatives, which is an important consideration in granting or denying variances, and also the opportunity to comply, at least to the greatest degree possible, to the code. The fact that there were structures which may have been within 5 feet of the side yard in the pre-existing structure, it cannot now be argued that because there was a structure that was 5 feet from the property line then, that we should now permit a new structure to be 5 feet from the property line. Particularly in view of the fact that there is an increase in elevation and an increased massing of the structures. It was mentioned that we don't like McMansions on our properties. Now, McMansions are usually thought of these 10,000 square foot structures on 3-acre parcels. But on a half-acre parcel on Town Line Road, which is traditionally a beachfront environment and neighborhood, a structure that's twice as large as the one that was there, which is 5 feet higher, and which is right to the side yard setback of the prior smaller structures, certainly creates the atmosphere of a McMansion. And it's overshadowing all the houses. Now, there was some effort made in the various individual variance applications to mitigate some of that, which I appreciate. But having addressed the overall picture of this being a very large structure on a very small parcel in a neighborhood which is traditionally beachfront cottages, even though that's, been encroached upon. And I think we've often had testimony about how the creeping variances begins to change a neighborhood over time. I think we need to address the individual variances. But individually, some of them are innocuous enough and they've been granted before in the past. But in context of 13 variances, each one being cumulative, the overall impact is undesirable. It would create an undesirable effect on the neighborhood. There are feasible alternatives. It's clearly a self-created hardship. I mean, the variance requirements really go strongly against the application as it stands. So some feedback on individual variance requests. Let's see. Starting with, I guess I'm going to take them in the order that they were presented. The parking. You're required to have 5 parking spaces in order to accommodate a 6-bedroom house. You've requested a variance to have 4 in the front yard. The argument has been that many of the properties on Town Line Road have parking spaces in the front yard, and that's true. And it's generally unobjectionable because there isn't any good place to put parking in those narrow lots on Town Line Road. However, the problem here is that those lots, those parking lots, the parking spaces are somewhat compressed and congested. And as Richard pointed out at the last meeting, though they seem to be there in fact, as a practical matter, they're probably not really usable. The turning radius doesn't permit their use. One of the spaces doesn't even have a way of getting into it or out of it. It's parking space 5, which would be more for turning in and out of a space than actually a space. So while it may technically comply with the legal requirement of having 5 spaces, it doesn't genuinely provide 5 parking spaces as a practical matter, which is an issue with parking on Town Line Road, if not in the parking areas provided on the property. So again, since we're talking about a clean slate and not a renovation or a squeezing something into an existing design, we think that that parking lot needs to be reconfigured. Now, before I go into the other specific, yeah, Richard.
So let's just clarify the parking requirement location with John Woodsman, if he's the code. To get that clear, I was assuming that it's 6 bedrooms. I thought there was 6 parking spaces that are needed. So maybe John can enlighten us what the code actually says.
The code actually states that every dwelling needs at least 2 parking spaces plus 1 additional parking space for every bedroom over 3. So a 4-bedroom house needs 3 spaces. 6-bedroom house needs 5 parking spots.
And then within the setbacks.
And you are not allowed to have parking in the required front or required side yard.
Okay.
So it's not the number of spaces here that's objectionable, it's the location of the spaces and the feasibility of their actual use.
Right.
Now, again, because it's a clean slate, and as you will see from the discussion of some of the other variances, I'm going to take the next variance request first, and then you'll understand what I'm suggesting with respect to the parking. The front yard variance that you're requesting. You begin by claiming and agreeing that you are moving the current front yard facade of the building back 18.5 feet from where it was, though it still requires a variance. But the argument being that it's a lesser variance because you've moved the house back. Since it's a clean slate and you're moving it back 18 and a half feet, the question is, why couldn't you move it back a little bit further? Which would then allow a more generous parking area that is realistic, usable, may even eliminate the need for a variance for a gate. Now, moving the property, the house back may diminish the rear yard available for other purposes to some degree, but we note that there's a 50-foot long swimming pool on this very small property. Standard swimming pools are generally like 20 by 40. The other applicant who's here today for the last variance that they got was for a swimming pool that's going to be 10 feet by 20 feet because it's on a very diminutive parcel on Bridge Lane. So when you're building on a diminutive parcel and you have a clean slate, then maybe a 50-foot long swimming pool isn't necessary, or maybe the whole thing needs to be moved back. But if the siting of the structure, and again, I'm sensitive to not having to redesign an entire house structure. I'm not going to start from scratch and redesign everything your architect's already done. But with with moving the structure further to the rear with some modest modifications to the structure, you might be able to eliminate or reduce the need for the variances, some of the variances that are requested. And as I say, one of them would be a more feasible parking area. The second one might be the elimination of the variance for the gate. And as I indicated in the past, and I speak for myself, not necessarily everyone on the board, I think gates on Town Line Road, to me, are offensive. I think they change the character of the neighborhood. I think if you have a gate on a large estate in a wooded area or something, maybe back farther north in the village, if they meet the setback requirements, then they're legal and we live with them. But they create the sense of a gated community, which Sagaponack is not. Particularly on Town Line Road, where this is traditionally a beach community, not a suburban community. Though there are some gates there closer to the beach where more people park when they go to the beach and there may be more pedestrian use, then maybe a gate could be more justified. The argument was made that it's for the safety of the child on the property, but they cited an accident that occurred there a few years ago where it wasn't caused by a child running out into the street. It was caused by a truck backing out of the driveway, hitting someone on Town Line Road, on a bicycle. So furthermore, there is a backyard and it is fenced, so a child can be outdoors playing in the backyard without danger of running into the street. So I guess if the gate met the setback requirements, then we don't have to opine on it. But if you're seeking a variance for a gate in the front yard, you just heard my opinion about that. All right. So that's the parking in the gate. In the front yard, in support of your front yard application, having moved the front facade back 18 and a half feet, I'm left with a couple of questions. Somehow the comps were cherry picked for houses that may have been closer to the street, but the ones that are most relevant, the one immediately to the north, 206, has a significantly larger front setback. And 172, immediately to the south, has a significantly further setback, as does 164. So the most relevant comparables, both north and south of this property, have larger front yard setbacks, and you are designing the property for a clean slate. Okay? And as I said, one way to move the property back, the structure back, without significantly impairing the design might be by shortening the pool, for example. All right. Other variances, the side yard. As I said, a 5-yard setback, is like going to have a 5-foot setback. Yeah, is kind of like an urban setback, townhouses. And even though some of the smaller cottages that were built on very narrow lots like that had those setbacks, I come back again, sorry to be so redundant, but it is a clean slate. Furthermore, there is a much larger setback to the north, when north of the north property line is the adjacent property owner's driveway and not their structure. So again, by reciting the structure, not necessarily by modifying it even, the setbacks could be adjusted to have a larger setback on the south without really impairing the design, and I think it would be more suitable. The argument was made that, well, we already only have a 5-foot setback on the south, but that again was a pre-existing structure. Furthermore, it was a garage, which is a less intensive use than a bedroom, which would now be only 5 feet from the sideline. So I think, again, taken in the context of the higher height and the greater massing of the entire principal dwelling, and that this is principal dwelling structure as opposed to accessory structure, that side yard setback is undesirable. It was mentioned that the garage setback was beneficial to the property owner to the south because it acted as sound attenuation, that it was screening. But it's been offered that there's going to be sound attenuating fence and green evergreens surrounding the property in any event. So I don't think one needs to have additional hard structure to serve as that sound attenuation to the south. Let's see. Okay. The pyramid. Again, on first blush, when we heard the application last month, it's a rather smallish pyramid encroachment. It's 133 cubic feet or 162 cubic feet worth, and they seem rather de minimis. And perhaps if that were the sole application, it would fly through without an issue. We've granted variances of more significant pyramid encroachments. But again, it's a clean slate, could be, you have feasible alternatives, including moving the structure slightly to the north, which would eliminate the pyramid request, or modifying the structure itself, which would eliminate the pyramid request. And again, in defense of the pyramid, it was cited that we gave a much larger pyramid grant on a property further to the south on Town Line Road. I took a look at that before coming here today, and that property is half the size of this one. This is a half acre. That's a quarter of an acre. It's the narrowest lot on all of Town Line Road. It would be impossible to build anything on that property without there being significant side lot and pyramid grants of variances, which is not the case here.
And just to further add to the pyramid law and the size of the house structure, whereas I'm gonna call it a square house. If this was more of an elongated rectangle house, it would mitigate north and south's yard setbacks. And then if they move the house to the west, it would also mitigate front yard setbacks, whereas it would alleviate more of the setback requirement through variance.
I agree with that, and if it were earlier in their development stage, then I would think that that might be more feasible than what I suggested, but I'm trying to be somewhat accommodating and understanding that they have a pretty extensive architectural design.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that, but I think the architect went a little overboard when he should have known the situation at hand with this small lot and all the side yard setbacks. That's what I feel about that with the architect.
Given that, which I take your point, I'm saying that given that the architect should have designed the structure to fit the lot in
Right.
compliance with the zoning code, certainly to minimize the number of variance requests. However, being where we are, and I'm not asking anybody to redesign their house or relocate the house. I'm really making suggestions that, in my opinion, it's less disruptive to the applicant's current plans to recite the existing architectural design than to redesign the architecture, make it elongated, which might have been a better solution to begin with.
Well, it's one half dozen the other, it's that statement, whereas the architect,
Sounds
says,
nicer when he says it.
where, they're asking for these multiple variances where all they had to do is make the house 10 feet more one way and 4 feet less the other. It mitigates a lot of the variance, pyramid law, and all front yard setback.
I agree with your argument. I take your point and I respect it. I'm merely saying that given where we are today, if they're going back to their drawing board, and it's their choice, they can either redesign their building to make it longer or narrower, or perhaps, if it's less expensive and quicker and preferable to their design objectives, they could recite the house slightly, perhaps modify the size of bedroom number 2, which is actually, it was hard to tell because the measurements were weird. They didn't measure the length of the room. It was the distance from the wall to the bed, the width of the bed, the distance from the bed to the other wall, and then another distance, which additively, it looks like that bedroom was 12 feet or so wide, which needn't be. I suppose it could be 10 or 11 feet wide, which might also eliminate a pyramid need and decrease the amount of the variance on the south, even without relocating the structure in its entirety. So there are a number of ways that they can address the comments. You've heard Richie's comments. He liked a narrower, longer structure, which might have been a better solution to begin with. I think under the circumstances, perhaps a less disruptive solution might be either narrowing that bedroom or reciting the house a little further to the north, or whatever else your architect.
Let's not forget about the pool house, though.
Yeah, well, the pool house too. Yeah,
That's farther
the pool
away.
house needn't be there merely because there was a structure at that location in the past. We are a clean slate. There's nothing to the north of that pool house. The hot tub is in there, which is a separate variance application about which I have no objection. So presumably you could move that pool house a little bit further to the north and the hot tub a little further to the north or so. Again, I don't want to dictate your design. We're in the spirit of trying to be constructive, giving you some ideas about how you might mitigate the overall impact of this application, which I think you can tell from comments, mostly mine, but other people will have, and you heard Richie's, were essentially negative to a granting of the application as presented. Now, again, legally, I suppose we can grant some of the variances, deny other variances, but again, that might interfere with your plan because I'm not sure how you adapt to or adjust getting a decision which gives you some variances, not others. I think it's fairer to give you a comment on the overall picture and have you deliberate as to the best way to adjust one or more of those applications to maximize the benefit to the community as articulated by us while minimizing any detriment to your client. As to the other applications, the hot tub is inoffensive, the pool equipment is inoffensive. The generator, we got information after closing the hearing that it's a 60 kilowatt generator, which I thought was excessive, but here you got one where Richard's more in favor than I was. He said for a house of that size, 60 kilowatt generator is not excessive. And
No, I think it's excessive.
Oh, you do?
That house would be a 400 amp service. That means you gotta have 30 for each. So if you only had 200 amp service, you only need a 27 kilowatt generator,
Okay,
Whereas you take out all the space and you want to run the whole house, then you need a bigger generator.
On the generator, I personally, when they said 60 kilowatts, I said, that sounds massive. The 40 kilowatt generator and the 60 kilowatt generator are the same size. And, you know, from Kohler or whatever, one, you know, there's no difference in the cabinet or anything. So the size of the generator or its output doesn't actually affect the structure itself or its noise output, or they're basically identical. So the engineer was the one that said, oh, 60 kilowatt. And then when we looked at it, it didn't really matter if we did a 40 or a 60. It's the same.
All right, well, as I said, at the meeting last time, I heard 60 kilowatts, which is what inspired me to request the specs on the generator and the decibel levels. The noise output, purposely left the hearing open for that purpose so that I could hear it. Having received that information, even though it wasn't completely clear, it seems that the decibel level, whether during exercise or during operations, is 62 to 63 decibels, and it's going to be with a sound attenuated fence. So I found that satisfactory as to its sound output and its size. It still seemed to me that it could have been better relocated, perhaps co-located with the pool equipment as opposed to a separate structure, which would be more efficient from a utility point of view, and wouldn't materially change its impact on any surrounding property or the applicants, because it's going to be surrounded by sound attenuating fencing, and it's alleged that it's no louder than I am. Therefore, it shouldn't matter whether it was with the pool enclosure or all the way at the back of the property. Unless you want to put me at the very back of the property. Okay, so I think that covers all 13 of the requested variances. Before I turn it back to you, because we'll have a little bit of change here, anybody else on the board have any comments? Did I miss anything? Did I misstate anything? All right, so again, they're satisfied with what I said until we close the hearing, and then they'll think of something else. So let's hear yours.
You know, and I do think, you know, getting a sense of the board and a comprehensive view and a chance to address some of these comprehensively rather than piecemeal. I think that's where we run afoul. I have not been involved in the development of this application, as you know, I was kind of brought in at the last minute to represent Eric, who's at his brother's 75th birthday party today, so he isn't here either. I do think there is some, one of the bigger concerns is this was all designed to have architectural, interesting lines and a little bit of texture into it. So long and narrow generally loses some of that. And so I think that's what we're trying to do, is balance their desire to have texture and levels versus just a straight code compliance that will actually match it. There were some aspects of the application that I think we did justify, which was the placement of the accessory structures to match the existing garage and the benefit that both properties receive from that. But I've heard the board on that as well. So, with your permission, what I'd like to do is bring all this back to the design professionals, the clients, and come back to you with what we think is a better balancing of all the interests and the sense of the board that I heard today.
I appreciate that willingness.
And I appreciate you providing us the opportunity to be able to, interact in this fashion. I think it's going to be a more productive pathway for us.
Yes, that's our objective. I have mentioned to people in the past that in dealing with municipal agencies, they usually think it's an adversarial relationship. I think our role as the Zoning Board of Appeals, particularly having been one of the draft people of the zoning code, we designed a code to suit an entire community, but we understand that real estate is unique, particularly this community with farm fields, with wetlands, with dunes, with oceanfront, with historic small structures, that it's actually quite rewarding to sit on the Zoning Board of Appeals to afford property owners relief from a general code where it meets the criteria of not doing harm to the neighborhood, the environment, the neighbors, the community. It's respectful of the code, and yet we try to accommodate people's enjoyment and use of their property to the best we can.
But one thing I did want to point out is I don't even know what the setbacks were when these structures were built in the seventies. It wasn't even the village of Sagaponic, it was built, so, the zoning code that imposed these is 3 acres, lots and all those setbacks long predates the construction of this structure as well. So, the relevance of today's zoning setback versus the community, we're kind of manufacturing certain things because we weren't around when this was built in the sixties or the seventies, I think. So, what we're trying to do is create the community that we're trying to foster.
Good morning, it's concrete day.
Yeah, I would suggest that there weren't any 10,000 square foot houses in Sagaponic back then either.
Certainly not more potatoes.
A lot of things have changed. By the way, one of the other features of this house, which I truly respect because it was actually something that I promoted when drafting the code, since we were concerned about not having oversized McMansions filling up the beautiful open farm fields. We said, well, to compensate for restricting the size of the structures above ground, we will grant you all the space that comes no higher than 3 feet above grade, where you can have your gym and your movie theater and your guest rooms and your maids' rooms and your bowling alleys. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your property to whatever you can afford and whatever you want, as long as it doesn't do violence to the essence of the community.
And I think that's a wise position. This property does include I think it's called a courtyard on there,
Yeah.
which is designed to encourage air and light. That is below ground. I didn't hear any substantive comments on that as part of the overall structure.
No, that was very, that was not objectionable. I
Okay.
meant to point that out. I guess I skipped over it. The sunken accessory areas and the north patio, those things were fine.
Okay.
And you almost doubled the size of the house. You got like essentially a 3-story house by all of the space. Half of the habitable area basically is below grade. It doesn't count against your FAR. So you've got very good use of that very small property without it impacting adversely on that neighborhood.
Well, we'll see if we can get a more efficient use of the buffer spaces.
Sure.
Hopefully we'll submit back to you, when it gets up your hearing. I think it has to be in a week or two before.
At least,
But
yes.
I'll
we have a
try to
chance
get
to
as
do
much of this done, for your reconsideration at the next meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments here from the, any further comments here? Okay, then, I will entertain a motion to continue this hearing to the May 10th, May 13th, right? Yes.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, to the May 8th
Maybe.
meeting of the zoning board, same time, same place. Second that motion, anyone?
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Okay, so the application has been reopened and continued to the May meeting. At which point we hope that we will hear some constructive responses to the comments today. Thank you, Ethan. Oh, and by the way, regards to Eric,
Yes.
I'm glad he had a good trip to Japan and that he is respecting his brother's 75th birthday. And we'll look forward to seeing both of you here next month.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Our next item of business is new business. I got a little confused. It's old business and new business. We have heard from Susan Lago.
She's here.
Susan. We heard from, oh, you're here in person. You're here. Yeah, Susan had been here before. So it's old business dealing with this property at 518 Bridge Lane, but it's a new application. We resolved, and first of all, it's been a couple of times, the renovation of the house to begin with, which we granted variance for, turned out lovely. It's a beautiful little property. I hope you're enjoying it. And notably, came back with a reasonable request for a swimming pool last time. And very accommodatingly moved that swimming pool from east to west to eliminate the need for a side yard setback. It was totally unavoidable to put in any pool in the backyard without a variance. And I wasn't sure whether you were or you weren't going to just accept the variance we granted for that pool or we're going to see if you could move it further from the house. This application does not do that. So the only thing that we are addressing on this application number 11 of 2025 pertaining to 518 Bridge Lane LLC is the anticipated area variance for the parking in the required side yard and 3 spaces where 5 would be required by code based upon the bedroom count that John Woodsman explained earlier. Susan, you want to make your presentation?
Well, my architect is on Zoom.
Oh, he's on?
He actually has all the.
Okay,
Also, can the record show I have the affidavits of posting and mailing?
thanks. Right. Pat, you always catch me on that. I always forget to ask you. You always remember to tell us, right? Okay, so
Anthony.
Anthony.
From
Okay, yes, you're here with us remotely?
Yes, I'm here on Zoom.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, you're on to tell us about the parking variance.
Yes. Okay. So the due to the nature of the property, which is, as we noted at the previous meeting, is a very undersized property for its zoning district. Really, the only legal place where we could put parking per code was in the backyard. And theoretically, there are 5 spots there now where you could park cars. Of course, if you've been by the property, you know that the driveway is on the side yard. You'll see that there's a nice gravel parking area there in the side yard. Even historically, before the renovation, that's where folks parked, was in that side yard, because that's a logical place to park. The problem is technically it's a required side yard, and you cannot have your required parking in a required side yard. So that is why we need to be here for this parking, which is really to just put the parking for the house where it's always been, but just legally now as part of its legal required parking count.
Okay, so that addresses the location. What about the number of spaces? For example,
I think here I found that Sagaponack Village does it a little bit differently than some of the other villages that I've worked with that have these sort of undersized lots. Where basically, as long as you can fit the required number of cars in the driveway, it doesn't matter whether they're stacked or not. Here in Sag Harbor Village, excuse me, Sagaponack Village, John explained to me that they really need to be side by side. You can't have one spot parking and blocking another. So even though that driveway is probably big enough to get 7 or 8 cars fitting in there off street, really technically we can only fit 3 cars side by side, and that's the reason for the number to be 3 instead of the 5 that is required.
would it be feasible to put another parking space, say, where along the easterly side of the property in the front yard, with a variance? Or the main concern right now, obviously, is not to have cars parking on or adjacent to Bridge Lane itself.
Yeah.
Which is a busy street.
And I mean, one thing I think that's a consideration here too, which I think the contractors building the house found out on the hard way, is that for most of the year, parking on Bridge Lane is not legal. So I mean, you that's like not even an option. You'd get ticketed. The other thing to a couple of other things to consider is that the front yard is almost completely taken up by the septic system. So that would need to be redone to have for traffic to be parked on it. And secondly, we just don't want to have. I mean, we did this beautiful renovation of this house, and part of the whole idea of it was to have the house a little bit closer to the street so you can see it and appreciate it. And I think to have parking, to get a variance to have parking in front of the house seems kind of counterproductive to having the variances to have it on the side, tucked on the side there.
All right, well, I wasn't suggesting it would be directly in front of the house where the septic system is. I was actually thinking the only other place that it might be would be where you're showing electrical service. But I take your point, both from an aesthetic and practical point of view, and as long as there is sufficient space within the existing driveway and where it widens out, that in the event there are more cars in any given period of time over a weekend or something when Susan has guests, that they would not be encroaching on the street. So, all right, so that's the point of view on both the location, the only feasible location for the parking spaces, and a justification for accepting only 3 parking spaces instead of the legally required 5. Anyone else have any comments in favor of or in opposition to or questioning these 2 reasons, the 2 variance requests, both as to number and location? Anybody in the audience? No. Hearing no further comments.
So if we're going to grant a variance for 3-car parking,
Yeah.
where it's required as 5, from what I gather, the plan shows it could probably park 6. So if we make a decision, it has to state that the parking area can't be any smaller, even though it's required to have 5 by code.
You're referring to the non-designated space
Yeah.
within the proposed driveway.
Meaning they have to.
You want them to maintain that driveway configuration, which would accommodate the additional cars, even if they're not in designated parking spaces. Is that necessary if these are the plans for what they're actually going to be building, the proposed driveway? Chris?
We always, so every decision when I write them, we as a condition in there, it says that it's got to abide by the plans submitted. So I mean, that's always, you're protected in that sense.
Okay, that's the answer we're looking for. Any other questions or comments?
If you get 3 off to the right, if they all angled toward what used to be the Coulter property?
Sorry, I'm not following your question.
Can I get up?
Yeah, sure.
Would you be able to, would you be able to get 3 going off this way?
You're talking about a diagonal parking.
Right, as opposed to 3 up
1,
that.
2.
Would you be able to do that?
You
Would you
mean,
be any benefit?
moving the driveway so it coming straight on the south side? Is that the south side to the left?
No, coming in and then at the end of the driveway, turning to the east.
Then you turn it
Turn to
in,
the
kind
east
of like
part.
we're trying to
Correct.
do the parking in front of Sam door.
Yeah, well, it probably would require the spaces then extending further toward the front of the property and the rear of the cars, if the spaces were diagonal, would be making it difficult to get in and out the reversing direction because they would be generally.
Yeah, it would take, what you're saying is it would take more room than
It
this.
didn't have this parking space right here.
So from a cost benefit analysis, you may gain another space coming closer to the road, but you might be losing the space up at the back there. That space number 3.
If we approve this, that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah.
Whenever you have, in parking, whenever you have to turn, you increase the square footage of the lot. So this is actually probably, for 3 cars, this is probably less square footage devoted to driveway than would be the case if they were angled parking.
Yeah, I think so. I personally think so. I don't think that you get a meaningful benefit by diagonalizing the parking here.
When the cars are parked, it might look better because you would have more open, you look through to the rear property. more clearly, but I don't think we've done the other one.
Okay.
All right? Okay, so I will then move to close the hearing on this application. Here a second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we've closed the hearing on the application. And,
That's granted.
sorry?
That's granted, yes.
Well, that doesn't constitute being granted, we just
Oh.
closed the
Okay.
hearing,
Okay.
meaning that we don't need any further testimony. But given the relative simplicity of the application, I'm willing to entertain an open discussion now before we adjourn the meeting of pros and cons, and perhaps we could render a decision. You already made your comments, John.
Yeah,
And you're persuaded that we're probably better off leaving them parallel.
no, I'm not sure I'm persuaded, but I'll accept whatever you say.
Okay. Any comments?
No, it's just a very small property. I think it's a jigsaw puzzle, and I don't think there's really, I think 5's a big number. I'm not sure you would need 5 for most days of the year, but I think this is fine.
She'd need a bigger swimming pool if she had to park 5 cars there.
That's still not really worth it.
50 by 20.
Richard?
I think they could redesign the parking to accommodate the 5 spots. Where it has a aesthetic look of the curved entrances to the larger section. They want to create a blockage from the street and to block the cars so they won't see cars all the time. And I can see the point of why he's putting the 3 there. And then, yeah, that car, they can park 6 cars there, but as John Woodsman says, it's not what the code allows, which is, I guess I'm okay with that parking area described in that location.
Okay, so I have no further comments myself. We've heard the comments of the other members of the board. Are we prepared to render a decision today to grant or deny the requested variances for side yard parking and 3 in lieu of 5 spaces?
So, but we would still, post-decision, we would adopt a written order.
Yeah, the decision will in fact be a written decision that Chris will prepare, at which we will formally adopt
Chris should have input.
at May meeting. So the most we can grant right now, the most we will grant right now, without having the benefit of a written decision that is specific, would be a recommendation to our council to draft a decision embodying what we're recommending today. So I would make the motion to recommend that we adopt, not that we adopt, but that we recommend the adoption of a resolution granting the applicant's request as shown on the survey. Let's see, it's dated July 27, 2022, but it's revised through January 26, 2026 for the parking plan. I would recommend that that plan be approved with the reduction of legal parking spaces from 5 to 3 and the side yard encroachments variance. Everyone okay with that? Okay, then that's our unanimous recommendation, Chris. Okay?
Okay.
All right, Susan, so it's not a formal decision today, but it's a pretty good indication of what you'll see when you get the written decision next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that concludes our business for the day, and I will therefore entertain and meet a resolution to adjourn the meeting. Second, all in favor? Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Nice way to spend the effort. Thank you.
I got to talk a lot.
Scott's quality.
Without sound and temporary fences.
Do you still need Chris?
I know, Chris, that's fine, we're good, yeah?
Hey, guys.
And by the way, thank you for getting us that draft of decisions for the other application of Caroline. That was very helpful to me in formulating what I had to do.
Yeah, it'll be good to see what they come back with.
Yeah,